Have you ever heard of a place so hidden, so drenched in mystery, that it almost feels like it doesn't exist? Well, let me take you to a story about such a place, a vanished village called Eldermire. This isn't just a legend. This is the story of a woman named Sophie, who ventured into the unknown, driven by an obsession that would change her life forever. Sophie was an anthropologist, someone who studies human history and culture. She wasn't just curious, she was relentless. Her journey started in her late grandfather's attic. While sorting through his old belongings, she stumbled upon a dusty leather journal. It was filled with hand-drawn maps, cryptic notes, and one entry that caught her eye. They took him. The village holds the key to our family's curse. Her grandfather had rarely spoken about his past, but now it felt like he was calling out to her. Sophie couldn't ignore it. The journal mentioned a village deep in an uncharted forest, a village that, according to local legend, had vanished 50 years ago. The village's name? Eldermire. Nobody spoke about it openly, but whispers hinted at eerie lights, haunting melodies, and a darkness that swallowed everything whole. Sophie wasn't one to believe in myths, but something about this journal, this personal plea, compelled her to investigate. She assembled a small team for her journey. There was Daniel, her best friend and a cartographer who could map even the most confusing terrains. Then there was Olivia, a historian with a knack for uncovering hidden truths, and Caleb, a guide who knew the forests better than anyone else. Together, they prepared for what they thought would be an exciting but straightforward expedition. They had no idea what awaited them. The first days of their trek were uneventful. The forest was dense but ordinary. As they ventured deeper, though, things began to change. Strange symbols appeared carved into the trees, symbols none of them recognized. The air grew colder, heavier, and the usual forest sounds faded. Caleb, the seasoned guide, started to grow uneasy. He muttered, "We're not alone." And even though the others laughed it off, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. On their third night, everything changed. They camped in a small clearing, trying to brush off the unease. But as they settled in, they heard it. A flute melody drifting through the trees. It wasn't just music, it was haunting, dissonant, as if the forest itself was singing. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. When morning came, they discovered footprints circling their camp. Barefoot, human-like footprints, but with elongated toes. Caleb insisted they turn back, but Sophie wouldn't hear of it. She was convinced they were close to finding Eldermire, and she was right. By the afternoon, they stumbled into a clearing, and there it was, Eldermire. The village was frozen in time. Wooden houses stood eerily intact, but vines crept over their walls, and broken windows revealed interiors thick with dust. There was no sign of life, but the air buzzed with an unnatural energy. In the center of the village stood a well, its stone walls covered in the same strange symbols they had seen in the forest. The group began exploring. Olivia took photographs, fascinated by the artifacts scattered around. Old tools, broken dolls, and books in an unknown language. Daniel sketched the village layout, while Caleb stood guard, clearly uncomfortable. As the sun set, that flute melody returned, louder this time. They couldn't pinpoint its source, and then they noticed something chilling. No matter where they wandered, they always ended up back at the well. That night, the group slept in the largest building, which appeared to be a town hall. Inside, they found murals depicting villagers worshipping a shadowy figure. Olivia swore the figure moved slightly when viewed out of the corner of her eye, but the others dismissed it as a trick of the light. When they woke the next morning, Daniel was gone. His belongings were untouched, but there was no trace of him. Caleb led a frantic search, but the forest had become a labyrinth. Sophie, desperate for answers, turned to her grandfather's journal. She found a torn page tucked inside. It read, "The flute calls them home. Do not follow the sound." Now terrified, the remaining trio focused on the well. Sophie was convinced it held the key to Daniel's disappearance and the village's curse. Caleb refused to go near it, but Sophie and Olivia decided to investigate. Peering into its depths, they saw faint, swirling lights. Suddenly, Sophie slipped, barely catching herself before falling in. For a moment, she swore she felt hands grasping at her ankles, cold and insistent. When they returned to the town hall, Caleb was gone too. In his place, they found his knife embedded in the floorboards and a trail of blood leading outside. Sophie and Olivia were now utterly alone. Sophie began seeing ghostly villagers out of the corner of her eye, shadowy figures performing mundane tasks, their faces twisted with sorrow. Olivia admitted she'd been seeing them too. Whatever had happened in this village, it wasn't just a disappearance. It was something far worse. Sophie became obsessed with the well. She was certain it was a gateway of some kind. Armed with Caleb's knife and the journal's cryptic instructions, she convinced Olivia to descend into the well with her. The pulley system creaked under their weight as they were lowered into suffocating darkness. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. At the bottom, they found a cavern illuminated by glowing veins of bioluminescent fungi. The cavern was massive, stretching farther than their lights could reveal. The walls were adorned with ancient carvings depicting rituals, sacrifices, and a dark figure towering over a kneeling crowd. In the center of the cavern stood a massive, pulsating, tree-like structure made of black stone. Its surface writhed as if alive, and faces, human faces, appeared and disappeared within it, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Olivia, entranced, began walking toward it. Sophie screamed for her to stop, but it was too late. The moment Olivia touched the stone, her body froze. Her face contorted in terror before she dissolved into the structure itself. Horrified, Sophie remembered the journal's final entry. Only by severing the roots can the curse be broken. Summoning every ounce of courage, she struck one of the stone's roots with Caleb's knife. The cavern began to tremble. The whispers turned into screams as the stone structure cracked and crumbled. Sophie barely escaped as the cavern collapsed behind her, sealing the well forever. When Sophie emerged, the village was gone. The clearing was empty, as if Eldermire had never existed. Exhausted and broken, she made her way back to civilization. She published her findings, though most dismissed them as fiction. Still, she knew the truth. The journal was her only proof, and the whispers that haunted her dreams were a constant reminder of what she had faced. Some places, Sophie realized, are meant to remain forgotten, and some doors should never be opened.